Hi, my name is Heidi Moss Erickson, and this webinar is going to talk about mobile apps in vocal pedagogy, inexpensive tools for biofeedback in the studio and practice room. And I'm grateful to my peers who requested this talk. So my background is in both science and voice. So I have extensive experience researching. I was a scientist at Rockefeller University for a while. And this is my Twitter bio, so I always find those are the most accurate. Um, so, of course, the big question is why mobile apps? And the first answer is quite obvious. The convenience and universal ease of use. We see everybody, including sadly little ones, using all sorts of mobile devices, which is why mobile apps would be very useful since they're a part of everyday life in the practice room as well as in the voice studio. So the next point is that they're very convenient, and a lot of vocal pedagogues use some very high level software on laptops that require a lot more effort and are not as portable. So, therefore, if you have an app that is reliable on a mobile device, you won't need your laptop and some high level microphones and equipment in order to use some of these higher level apps. The most important reason, I believe, for using mobile apps is the concept of biofeedback. And biofeedback is the process where we can gain an understanding, and it's well studied, of physiological functions using instruments that provide information on the activity of those systems. And so the goal is that we can thereby manipulate them at will through this immediate feedback response. And again, this is a well-studied mechanism. We have Fitbits, they call it quantitative life in the hip tech world. So we are more and more, as technology advances, using biofeedback methods to impact our entire life, whether it's meditation or exercise, so why not voice? One of my favorite elements of biofeedback is how it applies to learning styles and education. And again, this is another area of research that shows that, especially in younger people, but adults as well, the more inputs that you have that a teacher gives a student, the greater a student's understanding. So here we have, logical brain, verbal brain, physical brain, oral brain, visual brain. There's also social and solitary aspects of learning. And so as many as we can hit on these, the better. And then surprisingly, when they do statistics on learner types, this sort of shows which one is necessary. If you had to have one out of all of these, 65% of the population has a need for visual elements in learning. Now, in music, of course, we have our sheet music, but that is a very different part. It doesn't give us the technique or the pedagogy that we're talking about here. So in terms of the neuroscience of this, you can look at the brain and you can show that in standard traditional vocal pedagogy, we deal primarily with the auditory and the sensory motor part of the brain. And so that has been going on obviously for centuries, and it is a well-known and tried and true way of teaching voice. However, now that we have the tools, if we can make it better, the whole idea is making practice and performance more efficient and better, faster, by adding the visual, which is how now we can see sound in real time. Wouldn't that enhance the process of vocal pedagogy? So, here to summarize, when it's just the teacher and the student, as we know, we try not to rely on our own sense of hearing when we sing, because some of the feedback is not 100% reliable, relying on our teachers' ears, which are extremely important. We also have the physical sensation and observation, and the visual comes from either observing our own teacher or looking in the mirror. But when you have the app, as I said before, you have a visual confirmation of sound, and that then you can correlate, you can draw these lines between the physical experience that you're having and your teacher's comments and your teacher's ear. So your teacher can say that, was successful or that was not successful. And in addition to your own kinesthetic experience, you have a visual to solidify that experience. So I want to reiterate the teacher's ear is invaluable, irreplaceable, and necessary. However, the visual confirmation can help the student in the absence of the teacher to replicate sounds in the practice room when the teacher isn't there. That's why I call these apps sometimes the third ear, because sometimes it is difficult to replicate certain things. And we know that reinforcing mistakes can cause greater problems down the line for a student than being able to repeat positive exercises. And in the olden days, teachers would see their students daily, and we don't have that luxury anymore. So this is a really good way to have productive practice. So considerations in these apps, obviously the ease of use and the simplicity for both students and teachers. The display, we wanted something visually clear and understandable. The sensor, this was one of the most important features that I wanted to study, was to make the sound input reliable, because in the absence of that, we can't get good data. Then obviously inexpensive, so that all students have access to it. And then, of course, pedagogical utility to answer very fundamental questions that we all deal with as voice teachers and singers. So in doing this and I embarked on this study probably 2 years ago. So things have changed since then, and I've added things, but it was something that I was determined to do. I actually don't have funding for this. This was all done on my own. So I basically went to Google and input some terms, spectrograph, formant, voice analysis, and pulled up a ton of different apps with these constraints in mind. And I tested about 50 different apps at the time. New ones that come out, I test, and I've actually added one since this initial overview. And before I go into the positive results, there were a few very discrete and clear-cut bottom feeders that I just wanted to point out in the group because they're important. One app was called Sing with the Best, and this app was disappointing. And although I liked the display, it had sort of this. This is a spectrograph that you can actually show larger, and these nice curtains and the pitch. However, it judged your singing, and it did not like vibrato, the operatic kind. So I would say even if this is for pop singers, we want, number one, judgment isn't good to call a slow wobble or a wide wobble just for vibrato, but also you want the flexibility to have vibrancy in your tone regardless of genre. So I did not like this app. One app I was very excited about was very disappointing because it was called a formant analyzer, and it said that it could tell which vowel you were singing based on its formant analysis, but never in any test I gave it did it obtain an accurate vowel assessment. The third was a very clear-cut spectrogram app called Spectrogram by Schwam, and this one was challenging because there was no ability to control input gain, so everything was loud and it sort of blew out the display. So those were the three bottom of the tests that I did. And now for the good news. There were 4 clear-cut winners in this experiment. The first 2 I call simple because these are actually the most popular among my students and the most easy to use because the display is the fundamental only, and it's a linear rather than a logarithmic, and it has some very basic applications which I'll describe. So the first one is called Pitch Lab by Karl Morton. It's free. However, the spectrograph is an add-on for 99 cents. And this was actually the first app I discovered. It is a guitar tuning app, and it was only available on Droid at the time. And I actually emailed the developers and begged them to make it for iPhone, and they did. So that was really great, but you'll see the uses of that particular app. The next one is the newest one to my list. It's called Sing Scope by Springwell Music, and that is also free. And then the next set are more complex. So they give a full spectrograph with very detailed analysis that's possible. There is a light version that's free. I do really like the pro version. It's $20. It's very well worth it. And then the fourth one is called Spectrogram Pro. I'm actually not going to show data from that because it's very similar to Analyzer, and I actually use Analyzer a lot more. So I will go through. So the first app I'm going to go through in terms of applications is called Pitch Lab by Karl Morton. Again, this is a guitar tuning app, and you must pay 99 cents to add the spectrograph component. So this has a very simple interface. It's a linear graph with a fundamental pitch. So this is notes on the piano, so you can see on the left-hand side. They give letter names, including G3, A4 specifically, so you can clearly see the colors are also very pretty, and it's a very clean input. So there's a good signal-to-noise ratio. And then here's some singing, so you can actually see the vibrato around the pitch, and it picks up everything in between in these the colors really don't mean anything, unfortunately. It's the frequencies. So the applications I am employing with this particular app, I did asterisk for classical singing, but for purposes can be applied to any style. I actually do have a musical theater student later in one of my figures. So one of the applications is onset, offset. Another one is obviously vibrato, and legato, and of course pitch as well, people who are under pitch. I didn't list that, but that's a good example, which you will see. So here are some samples of onsets. So obviously we want the center of the pitch in classical singing and the vibrato to be above and below the pitch. So here you can see the waveform is really lovely. The onset is super clean on this E5. The image for vowels, it doesn't really change. It doesn't show, obviously, the complex tone that a vowel gives. So these are all ah vowels, just for clarity, but any other vowel shows the same kind of pattern. So you can see the onset starts right on the pitch, and then the waveform goes on it, and again, another onset. So here are some what I call corrections in terms of how students can correct their onset in real time. So sometimes students will have a glottal onset. Now sometimes this is wanted, obviously, if you want the glottal effect like an ish or so that is good to know also, that you have a visual representation of what the glottal onset looks like. Breathy onsets actually gives sort of this fuzzy background, the air. So that's, and then usually a delayed phonation also for a breathy onset. Delayed vibrancy is another one. Again, you may want that for your style, but it's also good to be able to see. Also, if a note starts under pitch and then gets corrected, those are very good to see. Okay. So offset obviously is similar to onset, but in reverse. So this is a release. This is really exaggerated, but some people who sort of punch the end of their onsets, you can see how it sort of disrupts the offset. And then the goal is to practice the clean release on a pitch center. Vibrato. So here are, you saw some examples that were really, really nice, clean, that was a well-trained singer. So sometimes vibratos present themselves orally that we hear as teachers, but we can't quite pinpoint the cause. I find that sometimes vibrato issues, we can come at from many, many different directions because there's so many causes. And being able to visualize it really, really helps a teacher sort of distinguish where the problem's coming from sometimes. So here, you can see that disequilibrium. This is a pressed phonation. And then without having to give any technical directives, it slowly starts to even out. This is a young singer, so the vibrato is not quite as wide. But you can see sort of how the vibrato sort of stabilizes into a more rhythmic pattern. This one, these are actually two different singers. So these two are one where I was getting a singer to sort of even out the vibrato in the end. And this is another young singer who sang a lot of straight tone, but she was trying to practice some of her vibrancy. And she had this really cute little pattern when it sounded really free. So, again, these are very diverse examples. This is one of my favorites because we often have singers who are under pitch. A lot of times they'll technically trying to correct pitch can be a challenge. Oftentimes it is a mental concept of the pitch, but there can be technical problems as well. And raising the eyebrows is not a solution. So here we have a soprano on F4, and you can see she was consistently, especially in this part of her range, which we know can be troublesome, was under pitch. The vibrancy was just too low. And then just by watching this app, no other element was used. The pitch was ultimately centered. So that's where the neuroscience kicks in, because you get a visual confirmation. It's playing a video game. And this, for me, is a great application. So here's another example of legato. So in classical singing, especially in bel canto or Puccini, we want a clean legato vibrating between pitches. Oftentimes I have students go on vowels only so that they can really sense that vibration. So in un bel di, the vowels u e. The first time she sang it, this is why we use the app, particularly between the u and the she was not getting any vibrancy here. She was getting a little bit going up. But again, looking at the app only, no other directives other than saying, try to vibrate through the pitches. It went from here to here in a matter of seconds. And I do feel that if I tried to direct her in any other way, it would not be as rapid a development. So I think this is a clear example of where visual enhances the technical. Here's the full text. Again, consonants will interrupt the legato, but you can work towards making it more legato here. Even the d phonated. So again, this is an example of a longer part, so how that helps. So the next app is the newest app I discovered. It's called SingScope by Springwell. This is a very similar interface to PitchLab because it's fundamental only, as well as being a linear graph. The great thing about this is its record and playback function. That is extremely appealing to singers because you can look at it and then record back. There's also input gain and graph contrast controls that you can manipulate a little bit. However, the problem I have with it, even though it's great, is that it's not as sensitive as PitchLab. So here you can see D major arpeggio legato on ah. It sometimes glitches. It'll just, anything that's softer, even if you adjust the gains, can not be as concise. So that's something you have to play with. I've not had the best luck with this in terms of that. So I always go to PitchLab, which the only disadvantage to PitchLab is there's no record and playback, but you can do that independently if you'd like. And I take pictures from the screenshots. Okay, so now we're going into the more complicated spectrograph apps for iPhone or Droid. This one is, it's not by Dexys. Please ignore that. I will tell you who it's by. I think I said it earlier. It's by a Polish, it'll be shown in the end. Sorry about that. It's a typo. This is a complex interface and it takes some practice, and experience with spectrographs is helpful. But what I love about it, this is the pro version, it has so many characteristics and flexibility that you could actually use it for data collection if you're doing research, I think, even though most people use some of the more advanced computer software, but it really has that kind of potential. So these are all of the, you can even touch the screen like you can with to zoom in and zoom out, which I'll show you later, as well as different interfaces. So I will show those as we go. There's Dexys. Okay, so, oh yeah, this is just some more of the, there's a YouTube link for some applications if you would like to go there. as well as if you Google audio analyzer. So I am going to go skip over this. I give this to when I give actual talks about to institutions. So if anyone wants to invite me, I'm happy to come. But it is, of course, when you're using a high-level spectrograph, you need some knowledge, of course, in acoustic science. So this is obviously overtones and sound waves. Also, some comments on vocal acoustics and what causes. These are the formants of singers, and so how those shapes then affect sound waves and some of the vowel constructs. This credit is Sundberg, and this credit is this German. I can't read it right now, but you can see here. It's very important to credit all of those people before us who have allowed this kind of work to happen. Thanks to Ian Howell, who just wrote on that in the Journal of Singing, if anyone's seen this recent edition of that. And that said, of course, this is in my regular talk, even before Ian's paper came out. These are contemporary resources. The science changes all the time. It is very good to look at the history, like Donald Miller and things like that, Sundberg. But in terms of contemporary resources, if you want a good primer for spectrogram analysis, Ian Howell has at New England Conservatory has a great intro on his website. This is one of the pictures from there, where you can really clearly see formant track here throughout all 5 vowels. And so these are the kinds of images that you're going to be looking at. Another great book that's invaluable is Ken Bozeman's book, Practical Voice Acoustics, that also talks about ways to think about acoustic science in vocal pedagogy. And then a primary paper for those super geeks, Tietze in 2016 wrote a paper called The Formant Range Profile for Singers. There's also some new nomenclature because the field does change how we name things. So it's good to sort of keep updated on these aspects as you go through. But if you're just using this for casual pedagogy, then go for it, because you don't need to be an expert in any of this in order to get a lot of value. So I just wanted to show that. Okay, analyzer. So some simple practical applications. Obviously, overtones and resonance, stability through the vowels, comparison of vowels. We talk about chiaro oscuro. A lot of times, the more you look at this, you'll start to hear a color and see a color, and that's one of the most fun things over time. The more you get exposed to this, you start to see sounds in different ways. So you can add, and I'll actually go through this later, what sort of displays you can have. I sort of like the 18-second display. It just sort of gives me just enough time. The key is adjusting the gains. So here's all 5 vowels, and this is a Helden tenor. I didn't do any analysis here. I just wanted to show you sort of what things look like. And here's a very quiet soprano, and you can adjust the gains. Again, you can adjust post-analysis as well. But this just shows how 2 very contrasting voices can appear on the same screen. So again, a very quiet, light soprano and a very, very large voice, Helden tenor, their appearance on the spectrograph. So it's a good sensitive mic app. Again, the software for that, I don't know how they did it, but it's brilliant. This is another fun one. It's just an F1H2 crossing of a musical theater baritone. And the reason I show this one is because this was via Skype. And so I teach via Skype sometimes, and the fact that the sensitivity can go through the computer and through to the mic here. So I always find that's fun. Now, this is the interface, just so, again, you'll have to play with it, but you have 3 options: the spectrograph, the oscilloscope, and the octave RTA. And you can put one or the other in the front or the back. This is an example here of the octave RTA in the front, and then the spectrograph in the back, or you can use the whole screen. And again, I usually obviously use the spectrograph as the dominant force. So here is another interface where this is an 18-second take. of EAO on A4, and then C5, and then an A triad on C4. So this is just a raw take with the gains that I set, and then I say, oh, okay, I want to look a little closer. Now, this is just using fingers like you do to zoom in on a picture. You can elongate these as much as you want to separate out. Then here is a level adjustment. I don't know if you can see. I know it's hard to see, unfortunately. But here, it just shows you can make, so now it's super bright. You can sort of pull it out so you can see it's just signal to noise ratio. But again, this is all post-analysis. And then you can zoom up close to sort of see what you want to see in more detail. So you have lots of options. You can export these images. You can adjust a lot of different things. So in summary, mobile apps are a convenient and portable supplement for both voice student and teacher. The visual biofeedback results in a rapid correction. That's, for me, the key. To get these instantaneous results is something that I wish more people did. The apps, of course, continue to evolve, so this is going to keep me busy for a while as I test and try to find new applications. PitchLab, SingScope, Analyzer, and Spectrogram Pro are the useful apps that I discovered out of about 50 that I tested. And the caveat that a teacher's ear is invaluable and is necessary to the pedagogic experience. I always want to reinforce that. These are the acknowledgments. Even though I wrote this talk a while ago, I recently, in the past year or so, got involved in a lot of amazing Facebook groups. This contingent of voice experts has inspired me, challenged me, changed my mind about a lot of different things, and I just can express my gratitude. So Ian, Dan, Kate, and everyone else, you know who you are. All of the scientists and Tizia at Rockefeller, oh, I spelled her name wrong. That's not good. Titi de Lange, there's an E at the end, taught me so much about how to be a scientist and think critically. My students, and I call them lab rats, both at the SFCM Prep and my private studio, who were letting me record them, their images. And then the app designers, Karl, Morton, I don't know how to pronounce it. That's the guy for Analyzer, and Springwell. I hope they know that singers are using them. And my husband, Kurt Erickson, who supports me in all of this because this is my hobby. And right now, I don't have funding for any of the work I do. So it's all a labor of love. So if you do wish to donate, there's no obligation, of course. I really believe in free access to information. But unfortunately, the arts isn't well funded, and neither is art science. So if anyone feels like they wish to donate to this work, which took a lot of hours to compile, this is my Venmo account. You can just also email me at bellscanto@gmail.com and just give me your feedback on what you think, if there are apps that you think I should look at, if you have any new applications to some of the apps that I presented, just anything. Feedback is always appreciated, and I'm grateful for people being interested. Keep on. Science is progress. Thank you.